Hello, how are you today? To Shan Merchant. I'm a relationship coach and an intimacy teacher, and I am shooting to you live from Ibiza. Hello, everyone. So today I wanted to shoot you a little video on setting personal boundaries in dating and relationships. And firstly, I just want to say, if you like any of my content, so if you're watching my videos or reading any of my posts, please can you like my YouTube channel, because I'm new to YouTube and that would really help me if you like my stuff. So anyway, I want to get on to today's topic. So I want to talk about setting personal boundaries. And so what exactly is a boundary? Well, a boundary is, gosh, I can hear some dogs in the background. A boundary is actually, what you say yes and what you say no to. So it's really about your sense of identity, as in who I am, in terms of I know where I end and where you begin. So it's about not taking responsibility for others and trying to care for others, or feeling guilty for others' feelings or for others' happiness. That's actually more codependency actually, but it's about really knowing, having your sense of self and knowing where you end and another person begins. And as well as that, it's about valuing yourself in terms of your personal standards, and also honoring your feelings and your needs. So, not dismissing yourself, and in the not dismissing yourself, that's where you find your no. So you'll be saying, well, it could be a firm no in response to something. No that you don't like something, or no that you don't want to do something, or no you won't be available at that time, or please can you not text me after a certain time, or I need space when I come home after work, so it's going to be individual to you, but it's going to be a boundary that really sets the end of you and the beginning of someone else. And this boundary, people always notice boundaries. Like, I am actually constantly impressed by people when I hear a boundary. And it makes me, and this is true for all people, it will make someone else value you more, because they can tell by that boundary, that's like, that person values themselves. They value their personal space, they value their physical body, they value their time. And the expectation is, for example, that people are honest with them, are respectful of them, are kind, so it's like values like this. They have these personal values, and when they feel that these are overstepped, then what they do is they set a personal boundary by speaking this. So it's really, really important actually, and it's extremely attractive for someone to set a personal boundary. And so what I also want to say is, sometimes what I do notice is, I notice that people can get confused in the moment. And so what happens is, you might be in a relationship with someone, or you might be on a date with someone, and they might be quite uncontained. So they might have low boundaries, and so not only do they not set boundaries for themselves, but they overstep others. And so then they might be quite emotional. They might be not owning their emotions, for example, and they might be saying, well, you're making me, I feel jealous. I don't want you to go out with your friends tonight because, I don't want to be at home. That's an overstepping of boundaries actually, because that's like them trying to make you responsible for their feelings. It might be the way that they speak to you, for example, or even the way they speak to someone else that you don't like. And what might happen is that sometimes you can get confused in the moment, and that something sort of doesn't feel right, but you don't know how to speak that. You don't know how to speak that boundary. And this is particularly true if you're learning how to speak your no and how to speak your boundaries. And so it's perfectly okay to go to go away from that experience, and then to reflect on that, and to consider what exactly it is which doesn't feel right for you, doesn't feel okay for you. And a really good way to do this is to distill it down to your values. Like, what is it exactly? Knowing what values are important to me as a person and part of my identity. What's been overstepped here? Is it honesty? Is it respect? Perhaps it's commitment. I need to have commitment before I do something, particularly if I'm in the early days of dating. It might be kindness, whatever value it is that has been overstepped. So distill it down to that, and then you can actually go back and then you can speak that boundary. And another thing that I want to say is that it doesn't actually matter. You can put in a boundary at any time. And I actually get, this is quite a common question actually that I get, is a girl might be dating and she'll be working on being high value, and then what happens is she ends up sleeping with the guy too early, and she hasn't put that boundary down, and then that guy's expecting her to, every time that they meet up, expecting to have sex, for example. And you can actually put down that boundary whenever you want in that relationship, and with any other type of boundary. It doesn't actually matter. You just need to set that boundary. And for example, if it was something around the sex, you might say something like, we had a really good time the other night, but that's not actually the type of girl I am, and I like to take things slowly. So can we take a step back and just really start to get to know each other more naturally? And that's why I can't come back to your house tonight. And what I want to say is that once you start putting in a boundary and having that firm no, people really start noticing. So if you haven't done it before and it's in some other scenario, then you can still start to speak that boundary anytime. And again, it's about really connecting to your feelings and your needs, and honouring those, not letting anyone overstep those. And what might be the circumstances that people might overstep them? Well, for example, sometimes people who have low boundaries themselves, they might overstep your space. So they might be really wanting to contact you a lot, for example. Let's say, for example, you finish work and you need some space after work to wind down, or you need to go to your yoga practice and you need to, make sure that you have these particular, you need to have your life, actually, the part of your life which really nurtures and sustains you. And you might have someone, a new boyfriend, for example, coming in and really wanting to see a lot of you because they've got, they wanting to speed fast into the relationship. And so it's about really, an example of setting a boundary in terms of your space, that, I really need my yoga class and I go to yoga 3 times a week, and that's just something that's really essential to nurture me and keep me fueled up and feeling good. And I really want to ask you to respect that, and I know that you'll understand. Do you know what I mean? So that's like quite a firm way of saying that, and it's also really communicating your self-value. And the other thing that I think as well is, in the beginning, in terms of communication, is another boundary actually, like how often you text each other. And one of my friends actually has a great thing on her WhatsApp here in Ibiza, and she says on her WhatsApp name, it says underneath it, I don't respond to messages after 9 p.m. And I actually love that, because that's actually a boundary, and it's so clear, really, really clear boundary. And she doesn't even have to speak it, it's just written there. And so people are like, oh, okay, that's her personal time. She doesn't respond to messages after 9 o'clock. So that's an example of a really good boundary, actually. And I would encourage you in the early stages of dating to really slow things down and really allow for times to, for things to develop. So you don't need to get into an intimate relationship really fast. You don't need to be texting, so you can put down some boundaries there and just allow things to open and evolve naturally, so you really start to get to know the person, and just enrich and really put your energy into your own life. And then when it's required, you can put down a boundary. So the other thing that I wanted to say is why might you struggle to put down a boundary? Well, some people feel guilty for putting down boundaries. Some people feel fear about putting down a boundary. And if you feel guilty, for example, that's where you're more like a caretaker or having a more codependent way of relating. And that's where you worry about other people's feelings and feel responsible for other people's happiness. And this is actually really an important piece of personal work, actually, because it's about really, again, it's about really realizing where you start and where you end. And so it's about, okay, so this is me, this is my identity, and I'm responsible. I'm going to really take responsible for my own feelings and for my own needs, and I'm really going to be connected to my values, like what's important for me in the terms of how I treat others and how they treat me. That's another important thing I forgot to mention, actually, is if you're going to set down healthy boundaries, it's super important you respect others. You have to do this. You can't be putting down boundaries yet overstepping others. So, it's really, really important that you do respect others. So going back to what I was saying is, You know, if you feel guilty or you worry about other people's feelings, then what you have to remember is that, you know, you are totally responsible for yourself. This is your own identity. You do the inner work on yourself. You look after your feelings, your needs. You have your values that you want to live by. You've got your personal standards, how you treat others and how you want to be treated. And so, you know, part of really growing your self-esteem and value is actually being able to communicate this, and then having to leave the other person to manage their own feelings, and not being really affected by them and having to go into fixing or pleasing, which then actually sabotages you, because you're then taking yourself out, and then actually what that does is it then weakens the boundary. So and then the other reason, of course, actually, is we learn all of this stuff as children. So as children, what we do is we look up to mother and father as the perfect role model. And so if you struggle to set boundaries in your relationships, then I would say that you had parents that struggled to set boundaries, and so they weren't able to put boundaries down with you, or perhaps they overstepped your own boundaries. And the other thing that I would say is that it's actually easier to set boundaries with in a personal relationship or with friends than with family, actually, because there's a lot more intensity around the family. And so, you know, again, I would say it's about, you know, even with your family, it's about starting to connect to your values, what's important to you, how you want to be treated, how you respect others, how you want others to respect you, what your standards are, and then really starting to speak those boundaries. And you can start off, you know, with small ones. Actually, it doesn't have to be a really big one, but it can be even about like how you like to be communicated with, how often you like to be called, or you know, or perhaps it might be even in conversation. You know, you might not like being talked to in a particular way, and so then you might need to set a boundary down and say, well, it really doesn't feel good for me when you say that, and can you please not do that? You know, that in itself is a simple boundary. So anyway, I've gone on for a bit. I was trying to make this a shorter video, but I hope you found that useful, and I'll see you all soon. Bye from me.